Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime, here at my next Boruto Anime episode review. This one's going to be for episode 34, which is called The Night of Shooting Stars. And yeah, overall I thought this was a pretty nice episode. Obviously, you know, you have the fact that it's kind of based around wanting to catch a fish. It obviously kind of screams filler. But I felt that, like, I suppose the emotional core, apart from just the episode being based around catching a fish, was actually kind of really well done, of just presenting this idea of, like, graduation is coming up very shortly, and the dynamics for all of these, you know, these classmates is going to change because they're going to be put into teams of 3. They're primarily only really going to be close to their teammates, and they may not get as much time to interact with each other as they did before. So, you know, the idea here is that you kind of more lean at the start of Boruto just thinking that everything's going to be the same. He's going to be really, really close friends with absolutely everyone, and friendships are forever, whereas Sarada kind of more presents the opposing viewpoint of, like, no, you've got to be realistic that some of these friendships are only going to last for just a few more weeks. After that, distractions are going to take over and maybe we won't be friends anymore. And I like that it was just about kind of, in a way, for the most part, like, Sarada actually learning kind of what it really, you know, meant to kind of be friends with people for, like, a long amount of time because of the conversations she has with Sakura. But also I think Boruto being a little bit more realistic about it, perhaps, and that acknowledging that, yeah, stuff is going to change when everyone graduates, and that there is a need for, like, a final big memorable moment between the group as a whole. And that's really what this episode was. It was just Boruto planning this kind of camping trip out to catch this fish that they thought was you know, legendary fish that tastes amazing, and this would be this amazing memorable moment that even if, you know, a lot of them don't get to see each other as much going forward, they'll always remember that they were friends in the academy and they will be friends afterwards, even if they're not with each other in the academy every single day like they are currently. And yeah, it really helped to kind of really establish the Boruto-Sarada dynamic at this point of, like, they are different people in that, like, Boruto, I think, is much more kind of optimistic in a way than Sarada, in that it is aspects of Naruto Sasuke going on here of, like, one's more of a pessimist, one's more of an optimist, and it's here, but in a kind of different way because Sarada's not as kind of pessimistic as like Sasuke was, and Boruto's not as optimistic as Naruto was, but it's still a worthwhile kind of interaction, seeing, I suppose, the influence of Boruto on Sarada, and then Sarada a little bit on Boruto as well, while also acknowledging that, like, you know, Sumire actually had a pretty nice episode here this time out of, you know, this being a notable moment for her being kind of, you know, relatively new to the village, and then with the arc that she had earlier on in the series, you know, kind of establishing that, like, this is her first time having friends, and she is beginning to understand, I suppose, the stuff that Boruto was saying of just having these close friends and maintaining them, and that she heavily believes in it, and she thanks Boruto a lot for kind of allowing that to kind of continue in the aftermath of the new arc. And it was cool to see that her kind of double down on the fact that she still wants to be a ninja, and she uses summoning jutsu and summons a much smaller Nu out, which I think we knew. I think towards the end of that arc we kind of saw that one was growing again. So it's cool that she has, you know, control over it, and obviously as she grows as a shinobi, the Nu will grow, and so she'll become more powerful, because I assume they're going to emphasize her as maybe a summoning jutsu specialist, and with her connection with the Nu. So that was a cool moment that I kind of didn't expect. Obviously you kind of had the big action moment of the episode be based around them reeling in this giant fish, and the teamwork from everyone required, of Boruto obviously being the one really set on doing this and showing his determination, him kind of bringing Sarada on board, and that being a kind of show of her kind of development within this episode, that she's just as interested in getting the fish as well. Sumire helping, you had Mitsuki arrive, you had Iwabe do something, you know, you had Metal Lee there, everyone, you know, contributed something. Denki, gave the words of support as Chocho kind of did her thing. So it was, it's a solid, little action scene, given that it was just this almost absurd premise of just, we're going to catch this giant fish and we need to use ninja techniques to actually kind of catch it. But they got it. It led to the very emotional moment where they all acknowledge that it is this amazing thing they are going to remember. Maybe not like forever, maybe not eternal, but it definitely is a notable moment for all of them that they will remember. You see Sumire looking up at the night sky, and it's an even more memorable moment because they're eating this great food, the sky is kind of perfect, and that they will remember it. And I think that the core at the end is basically that this thing that Boruto set up worked, and the biggest thing probably was that Sarada actually got as much out of it as everyone else, despite thinking that, like, oh, I'm just going because everyone else is going, I don't think it'll be that great, which is obviously where the importance of that Sakura scene was. And I like that, the example that Sakura gave was just that, I didn't really know Naruto all that much in the academy, that we weren't really friends. But when we became a team, over time we became kind of almost more than family. That's how close it was within the team. And that to this day, I am still friends with basically almost everyone from the academy days when we were teams going forward. And that was a big moment for Sarada, just knowing that, like, here's an example perfectly of, like, the previous generation of, like, just acknowledging that, yeah, like, my mom's teammates were the person who's now her husband, and then the Hokage, who's like her best friend, and she's also friends with, like, my classmates' parents, like, basically all of them, and that she kind of has hope going forward that can be the case now herself. So I really like that you kind of have Boruto and Sarada learning from each other. It establishes, like, why that team is kind of so important. I suppose if there's anything to develop going forward with the Boruto Sarada Mitsuki relationship, it is probably Mitsuki and Sarada, kind of what their dynamic necessarily is, if there is any. Obviously there's a sort of connection there, because, like, Boruto's connection to Mitsuki is that, like, obviously Boruto just is kind of, like, open to everyone, and then Mitsuki obviously has the deeper connection of, like, seeing Boruto as this kind of guiding light, his sun that kind of shines on him to kind of get away the darkness of kind of where he comes from. And then I'd hope that they maybe tried to do something with the fact that obviously Sarada is, Sasuke's daughter, and the Orochimaru connection to Sasuke, and maybe something there. I'm not really sure how you'd approach doing that, but it's definitely within that team of three the dynamic that needs the most focus. The only other thing in the episode is that just after the credits, they have a kind of almost like a stinger moment of just, like, here's Tonieri Otsutsuki up on the moon, I believe, and suddenly, like, it's like reality is kind of cracking, and it's obviously setting up the idea that this is Momoshiki Otsutsuki arriving, and this is going to be Momoshiki and Kinshiki Otsutsuki. They're going to be arriving soon, and it almost feels like he, in a way, is, like, using the last ounces of his powers to kind of keep them away, and that's why he seems to be, like, suffering now with the cracks kind of coming in. I hope that's perhaps how they go about explaining it, because it would make sense to kind of develop that Otsutsuki arc a little bit more, to explain more about just the dynamics of the Otsutsukis, because if they are going to just completely have an anime adaptation of the movie arc expanding on everything, it gives you opportunity to delve into the Otsutsuki stuff as well, because you're going to have a big explanation come the end of the arc when the fight happens about the Boruto with the seal on his hand and the tattoo powers that later come into play, and how that relates to his eye powers now as well. Plus just the idea of, like, the importance of the fact that Boruto kills a god, basically, kills an Otsutsuki, and what the significance of that really is. Because outside of kind of knowing that they're just kind of like this other species from space, from, like, alternate dimensions, we know that there is something different about them. They are like a different species. They're not just humans, that they have natural abilities outside of just that they, you know, seek chakra fruits over time. We saw that they do have abilities just kind of latent to them. So that is an interesting one of just like, is the seal power caused purely by having killed an Otsutsuki member? Is that the main thing with that? But we'll have to obviously wait and see. But I like that they're using the Otsutsuki stuff a little bit more. And I'm very interested to see what announcements come in the coming weeks about where exactly we're going, how in depth we're going to cover the movie stuff, and so on, and potentially what that means for like the manga adaptation of the arc, as well as the movie. Because I think as time goes on, that movie is really beginning to feel like, yeah, that was just a kind of high budget thing we did to start Boruto, but going forward, expanding on that stuff, we're just going to add in stuff that basically kind of in a way makes that probably the best animated version of the story, but like the least in-depth version of the story. So it's really weird that we're going to have potentially 3 versions of that movie story, and probably the anime version is going to be the one that covers the most ground, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, that's been my review for episode 34. A solid episode that I think managed to get past potentially being a filler episode by actually having a very nice kind of emotional core to it, with just the idea of, you know, some of the last few days that this group is really spending as just the academy class of this year kind of type thing, that the last few moments before they are super focused on teams of 3 and maybe not interacting with everyone as much. So yeah, let me know in the comments what your thoughts were on the episode, as well as what I had to say about it here. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.